welcome to Brand X Reviews. This is the first video that I've done of this kind. I recently kind of announced on the Facebook page that I'm going to start doing what I'm going to call BXR, that means Brand X Reviews. BXR Mailbag. And this is where it gives the opportunity to some of my regular viewers, all 2 or 3 of them, to email in questions, leave questions on the Facebook page, what they want to talk about, basically, what they want me to talk about, what they want me to kind of offer my opinion on. Now, I'm by no means an expert on films and stuff like that, but I do tend to follow news and analysis of things as well. And things like comic book films, stuff like that, I tend to have read a lot of them, so I can probably offer a bit more insight than your average film viewer can. So I'm going to start this one with one that was been sent in by Paul Cage, and he is somebody that's on the Facebook page. So let's read his question anyway.
The new Ant-Man trailer is here and looks good. I always thought Ant-Man was Hank Pym and that's it. Judging off the trailer, it looks like Hank is retired already. Who is the new Ant-Man, and will he have any link in the creation of Ultron? Also, do you think all the Marvel heroes will share screen time, example Ant-Man and Avengers, etc., all together?
Quite a few questions there, Paul. All great questions. This is one of the most recent questions I've had, but it's actually one of the first questions. The reason I've kind of bumped this one up to the front is because we had the Ant-Man trailer released recently, so it's fairly topical, is this? So let's break this down, because quite a few things, like I said, that you're asking. Agreed for starters, the Ant-Man trailer does look very good. I did briefly talk about this in the Agent Carter pilot episode review I did yesterday, so you can get my kind of opinions on that. But yeah, it definitely looks great. And as you say, you've always thought that Ant-Man was Hank Pym, and that's it. But what it is, this is Ant-Man, right? So he has taken a few different looks over the years. There's different incarnations. There's kind of no debate in that. I'm going to offer you my knowledge of this character. This is Ant-Man here, sort of as he originally was. Like I said, there's variations on how he's appeared. Now, Ant-Man is also known as Giant Man sometimes. I've read a lot of the early 1960s Marvel comics with Ant-Man. Hank Pym, Giant Man as well, because obviously if you just put G-I in front of Ant-Man, you get Giant Man. So he could shrink down to the size of an ant, or smaller, but he can also grow, and he's just huge. It varies depending on which kind of version of the character and which era you're kind of reading. But generally speaking, that is correct. Hank Pym is this guy, and now you're basically asking, you thought that Hank Pym was Ant-Man, but actually no, according to the trailer, it's this guy that's being referred to as Scott. Who is that? Well, from what I understand, Hank Pym was the original Ant-Man, and at some stage he kind of went a bit off the rails. And at one stage, he actually punched his girlfriend, who was the Wasp, as well. Well, the Wasp, as far as I know, isn't really going to be in the films, so I'm not going to really go in that direction. But he had kind of a split personality sort of thing, and he gave up the Ant-Man and became Yellow Jacket with a lot of the same sort of powers. And this was the Yellow Jacket character. Now, at some point along the line, there was a character called Scott Lang, and his daughter was ill or something like that, and he needed money to pay for her medical bills. And in order to do it, I think he was a janitor or something that worked for Hank Pym, and he used his position to steal the Ant-Man costume. Now, if you can shrink, obviously, it kind of invites all kinds of heist opportunities. You could shrink down, you could get into a bank, you can steal, because he can shrink other things as well, not just himself. And you could steal money that way. You could obviously shrink yourself down, get the money, shrink all that, then just kind of leave, and then just go into an alleyway and then just go back to normal size. You've got all your money, you pretty much go where you want with it. So that's what happened, but he got caught anyway, and the mantle pretty much got passed to Scott Lang. Scott Lang became the new Ant-Man, and Hank Pym just kind of carried on with what he was doing. They're sort of doing that with this. Now, it was kind of later on, that wasn't that early on in the Ant-Man timeline from when it started. But I think with this film, they're kind of putting his history into one film. Because as far as I know, they're only going to do this one film. They haven't announced any more. I mean, whether they do or not probably depends on the success of this, but there's no more planned at this stage. And it's doubtful that they will do one in the next 4 years because they're already mapped out pretty much what films are going to do. They're doing 3 a year. I don't really see them doing another one. But anyway, point is, they're condensing a lot of that history into this one film to the point where you're not really going to see Hank Pym's Ant-Man as he was like this. You're going to see Scott Lang's Ant-Man as he looks like this. Now, obviously, as I say in the comics, Hank Pym became Yellow Jacket, which was this guy. It doesn't seem like that's where they're going with it. There is a Yellow Jacket character in the film, but I don't know much about it. It's been kept fairly secretive at this point. For anyone else watching this video down the line, it's like January 2015, so there's not really much that's been revealed. We've only just seen the first teaser trailer, but there are a couple of pictures of the Yellow Jacket and what it looks like. Now that's pretty much it. This is a banner of the Ant-Man poster that's kind of been recent. That's kind of the thing in like normal size, but you can see there. That's what the Yellow Jacket looks like, basically. Kind of like an insect. That's kind of where they're going with the film. Now, I don't know if Yellow Jacket, if Hank Pym, played by Michael Douglas in this film, as an older man, I don't know if he's going to be Yellow Jacket. Kind of like Obadiah Stane was the Ironmonger. He was like the older mentor to Tony Stark, but then it turned out he was actually the bad guy. I don't think that's where they're going with this. I don't think that they would do that to Hank Pym's character. That said, look what they did with the Mandarin in Iron Man 3. You never know what kind of surprises they've got up their sleeves, but I don't see them doing that, but you never know. So that's pretty much that answers that question. That is why you're not really getting Hank Pym's Ant-Man in this film. Now, I do understand that a lot of this film is going to have flashbacks to, I would say, around the 1970s, 1980s, because it's got the guy that played Howard Stark in Iron Man 2 in some of the stock footage features from the Stark Expo of the 1970s. The guy that played Howard Stark, that's Tony Stark's father, in Iron Man 2, is going to be in Ant-Man, so he's reprising his role. Now, there was Dominic Cooper that played a younger Howard Stark, circa 1940s. So Dominic Cooper isn't playing that Howard Stark. We're going to get to see the older Howard Stark as he was in, I'm guessing, the 70s and 80s, because played by, like I say, the actor that played him in that era from Iron Man 2. So I also understand that I know that they've put a request out to cast a young-looking actor. Well, basically a younger version of Michael Douglas now, whether they're going to use that in terms of they're going to CGI him to kind of make him look like a younger Michael Douglas, so they can show that in. This is Hank Pym back in the 70s kind of thing. I don't quite know if that's what they're going to do, like how they're going to do that. But that's all that's in there anyway, so that's kind of in the works. So you will see Hank Pym when he was in his prime, pretty much, in the 70s or 80s. I'm guessing that's the era that it's going to be. And but most of the film is set modern day. Ant-Man is, well, the original Ant-Man is Hank Pym, but he's now old. He passes the mantle down to Scott Lang, and it does appear from the trailers that they're keeping the genesis of the Scott Lang Ant-Man the same, because in the trailer it showed his daughter is ill, so that was kind of what Scott Lang's motivation was when he stole the Ant-Man costume. I don't know if he steals it in this. It does show that he's been like arrested at one point. He's kind of being led by police in handcuffs from the looks of it. So it does seem like they're going to keep a lot of that, which is good. A lot of people don't really like Ant-Man. They think, I know my core reviewer, as you well know, Paul, that asked this question. You've met him. He's not a big fan of the Ant-Man character. I can certainly see why. I can agree with him in a lot of ways. His powers are kind of limited. It's like, yeah, he can shrink and he can grow. I don't know if he's going to grow in the film, but I know he's going to shrink. Seems kind of silly and restrictive in what he can do. Not very practical for a superhero as such, but Ant-Man isn't really a superhero like Tony Stark. He's not he can do stuff physical, but that's not the extent of what he does. He's more kind of like an intellectual, an inventor, I guess, primarily over anything else. Again, you can say that Tony Stark, but kind of like Reed Richards out of Fantastic Four. He's kind of more that kind of superhero. It's like, yeah, he can do physical stuff, but it's more that's more his weapon. And he's a bit of a pacifist as well from some of the things that I've read. He's the kind of person who doesn't like getting into conflicts and would actually kind of be at odds with the Avengers, saying, look, you know, you guys, you're just causing a lot of trouble and blowing stuff up. I don't want any part of it. I think that's kind of why he's disliked in a lot of ways, because he seems very, not anti-war. I mean, there's nobility about being anti-war, in my opinion, but he's kind of, when we're being invaded, you know, we have to fight it off, and Ant-Man would be just like, no, it's not my thing, kind of thing. So it's kind of that's in some incarnations. I'm not saying that's the character overall, but we'll see anyway. We'll see how it plays out in the film. It'll be interesting to see. But those are my theories anyway. So that was to answer your question. Hank Pym, why is he not the Ant-Man? Why is it this Scott Lang? And that's the character was. I feel like I'm kind of going around in circles there, so I'll kind of shut up on that for now. So what else did he say? Judging off the new trailer, it looks like Hank is retired already. Yeah, like I say, it's Michael Douglas. He's an older person. He's passing the torch. Now, who is the new Ant-Man, and will there be any link in the creation of Ultron? That's another good question, because, as I say, the Hank Pym character is in the comics the one who creates Ultron. Ultron kind of appeared. He was around for a while. They'd reveal who he was and stuff, and then they'd backtrack on it a little bit. But then later on, it turned out that Hank Pym had created the Ultron character, and so ultimately he was responsible for creating one of the Avengers' greatest enemies, one of the Avengers' greatest, most strongest enemies, basically. He's built of adamantium metal in the comics. Now they can't do adamantium in these films, because that is, as far as the film franchise goes, that is owned by 20th Century Fox and their X-Men license to make the X-Men films. So I'm assuming in this they're just going to say, well, bollocks to it, Ultron is made of vibranium, it's pretty much a similar metal, it's indestructible. And through that, I think that's how it's going to tie in with Black Panther. But we'll save that for another day anyway. It's not going to have Black Panther in Age of Ultron, but they're going to kind of introduce bits of the Black Panther universe in Avengers Age of Ultron. Namely this character called Ulysses Klaue, played by Andy Serkis, I believe. And you actually see him for a brief second in the teaser trailer as well that they released in October. But, so yeah, as far as I'm aware, Ultron is going to be made of vibranium. And in Avengers Age of Ultron, we know this from the trailer, we know this from the plot synopsis as well, that Tony Stark in the films is the one that creates Ultron. But the official synopsis basically says that Tony Stark has just kind of brought back this peacekeeping program from, it doesn't say Cold War era, but that's kind of what I'm reading into it. We're going back to going back 30 years or so. He brings something back from the 1930s, not 1930s, from the 1980s or whatever, that era, and updates it, and that becomes Ultron. So he doesn't create it from scratch, basically. Now, what I'm kind of thinking there is what they're going to do is, because I've heard that the Age of Ultron and the subsequent film Ant-Man are going to be closely connected. I think that Hank Pym is going to have created elements of Ultron to start with, but just kind of realise, well, actually this could be used as a dangerous weapon, and then just abandons it. And then Tony Stark discovers all that, and because obviously it's got Howard Stark in Ant-Man as well, so he may have worked on Ultron in like an early phase of it. It could have just been software at that stage, artificial intelligence software, for example. And if they developed that back then, through Howard Stark passing stuff down to his son, similar to what we saw with Captain America's shield, that was something that clearly Howard Stark had passed down father to son, so that's how Tony Stark had bits of Captain America's shield, or one of Captain America's shields anyway, because you see it in the film. Well, 1 and 2, it's in both films, you kind of see it. So I'm thinking that's where they're going to go, that it was originally, Ultron essentially was born out of something that Hank Pym made, which you will get to see, and then how Tony Stark basically weaponises it and puts it into his Iron Man suits that aren't suits that you wouldn't necessarily wear, but they're more like robots, because that's where he was going. That's where we last saw him in Iron Man 3 with his suits. they were more like robots. So if he takes software that was created by Hank Pym or whatever, decades ago, artificial intelligence, puts that into the Iron Man suits that are like robots, the two combined, that's what you see in the trailer pretty much. You get to see what looks like an Iron Man suit kind of beginning to look like the Ultron character, coming out and basically becoming self-aware, Terminator style, decides that as a peacekeeping functioning robot or whatever, it realises the quickest and most efficient way or whatever of achieving world peace is just kill all humans, which kind of logically makes sense, but that's kind of the way the character is in the comics. So that's kind of how these films tie in. That's how Ultron ties in, as far as I'm aware. Now, I have read something to the contrary as well. There was some information that came out recently, and I don't know if it's off some of the toys that they're going to bring out for this film, or like the books or something. But it was like a blurb, and it kind of talked about Ultron's origins, and it actually says that some of the software for Ultron was actually found by Tony Stark in the ruins of, or the aftermath of, the Battle of New York when the Chitauri invaded. So some of the software, it seems from this information I'm getting, is actually Chitauri computer software. I don't know if their computers are Apple or Windows compatible, but it's kind of like Independence Day. But it does seem like that's, according to that source anyway, that's where that's coming from. So again, it's all theories really. Like, they do like to keep these things under wrap, but from what I understand, I mean, it could be all three. It could be bits of computer technology that Hank Pym had created decades ago, combined with Chitauri technology, combined with the Iron Man suits, the robot functioning ones that you saw in Iron Man 3. Put all that together and it's kind of a recipe for disaster. And moving forward, I think that's going to tie in with the Civil War stuff as well. But you didn't really ask that, did you, Paul? So I'm not really going to go down there. Now, the last part of your question, do you also think that the Marvel heroes will share screen time, example, Ant-Man and Avengers, etc. altogether? I would say, of course. I don't think they would introduce the Ant-Man character in just one film and just leave it at that. Like I say, they haven't planned sequels for this film as yet. They haven't announced them, certainly, anyway. And the way that they've announced their lineup so far, we've got like 3 films a year. It's very doubtful that they would add to that at this stage. So unless they're going to do a sequel to this film in 2000 and... is it 19, I think? 2019 is the first year that we only know of one film, and that is Infinity War Part 2. So there's space for another 2 films in 2019, so they could do an Ant-Man sequel there. But that depends on the success of this. We don't know how well Ant-Man's going to be received. It does seem from the trailer that they are fairly self-aware that Ant-Man, just to somebody who doesn't know the Marvel characters, it just sounds ridiculous. I mean, Spider-Man, that's one thing, but Ant-Man, it sounds like he is an ant. He's not an ant, he can just shrink. I mean, Spider-Man is kind of spider-like, he's got spider powers and webs and stuff. Ant-Man is just, he can shrink. He can interact with ants as well, or something else, but through the helmet that he wears. But he doesn't become an ant or anything like that. So it just kind of sounds ridiculous, and they kind of joke about that in the film when the Hank Pym, played by Michael Douglas, says to Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, I want you to be the Ant-Man. And he just goes, huh, like that. Because you're kind of thinking, what? Ant-Man? That sounds ridiculous.
Scott, I need you to be the Ant-Man.
And also at the end of the trailer, he's like, just one question, is it too late to change the name? So that was quite funny anyway. But it's kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer. It was like, you know who I am? I'm Peter Quill, also known as Star-Lord. And then the guy's like, who? And then there's like a big question, like, who are the Guardians of the Galaxy? Exactly. The film studios, the filmmakers know that you, the audience out there, most of you don't know like who these characters are, so why would you go see it? So that, they're self-aware. It's a good way of playing it, basically, and they're kind of continuing it with this Ant-Man film. So as I say, the character does seem a bit kind of ridiculous. Some of his powers aren't really practical. Going back to what I was saying, like I said, the core, for example, is kind of voiced his kind of concerns about his film and the character. Not saying it's going to be rubbish, but just concerns because it doesn't seem like he's the kind of character that would really be able to kind of save the world in the same way that like Thor can. Having said that, some of his powers, I mean, I don't know if he grows in this or whether he just shrinks, but when he's Giant Man, he can be very strong and he can basically just kind of whoosh, slap the Hulk with the palm of his hand and like knock him through buildings and stuff. So he does have his practicality, like his powers, like in a practical sense. So that's quite good. What else? But you were basically, your question anyway is will they appear together? Like I said, I reckon they would. It's something, putting guys on screen together in these team franchises. It does seem to be very popular. It's something that they've done with things like the Expendables as well, putting a lot of actors together. Guys that you usually see kind of on their own, isn't it great to kind of connect them? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Avengers obviously worked. The real question is, are they going to link in Guardians of the Galaxy with the Avengers? Is it James Gunn, the director of the first one, and he's directing the second one, due out in 2017, has said there are no plans to connect the Guardians of the Galaxy and put them on screen with the Avengers. Well, I say bollocks to that. He is somebody, the director James Gunn is somebody who really has kind of played his cards close to his chest. He said when the first film came out, when it was just being released, just as it was being released, they aren't going to do a sequel. They're not planning a sequel. And then just before the film was released, they announced it. So we hadn't even seen if the first one had been successful or not. I think they knew that it would be. But it says as well, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 will be coming out as well. So we know that he said stuff before, and it turned out, yeah, you were planning the exact opposite of what you just said. So I think that they will, and plus he's not saying that they won't, he's just saying that there are no plans to. So I think it's probably the smart way. That's what I would do, to be honest. I'm not saying that he's lying, he's a bad person. I'm just saying that's the kind of way he's playing it, and it's the way I would, because if you say yes they are, you're tied down. If you say they aren't, you're a liar. So the way that he's played it, he's just said, there's no plans to do that. But they've got to, and it will make sense as well in Infinity War Part 1, which is 2018, Part 2 in 2019, so that's essentially Avengers 3 and 4. That is when Thanos comes, and in what he's going to do with the Infinity Gauntlet, he's going to involve everybody. It does in the comic. Everybody has to come together. In fact, they put so many people together in that comic, they had to get Thanos to do his thing where he clicked his fingers literally with a gauntlet on and killed half the universe. Which was a good way of kind of taking out a lot of characters, because you would say, well, why isn't this character in it? Why isn't that one in it? It's like, well, just kill half the universe. You can kill off half of the Marvel characters, so you can have everybody that's left rather than just saying every character, because you just really couldn't fit all those characters in. So we can just say, well, they're not in it because they're dead. We'll just put in the ones, as many as we can. The rest are dead. So how they're going to work this in the films, I don't know exactly, but it's going to involve everybody, presumably, if they're going off what they do in the comics. And that's what everybody wants to see. Avengers Assemble in 2012 pretty much brought everybody together. There are a few characters that they didn't bring in, characters like Betty Ross from The Incredible Hulk, and General Ross as well. And there was the Jane Foster character from Thor as well, because it's hard to put so many people on screen together and all give them equal or deservedly equal time on screen together. And if you just give one character one scene, there's a lot of people kick off and say, why didn't you give them more? So it's not always possible to have everybody in it, but I think with Avengers Infinity War Part 1 and 2, especially with it being split into two films, two parts, the opportunity is there to really get everybody in there, and I assume that would include, as your question is, Ant-Man. Will you see Ant-Man with the Avengers? So I say yes. But as for a sequel to Ant-Man, I don't know. I don't know if the character's going to be popular enough, because it could just be like the Hulk. He's a good character, but don't overdo it. Just do one film. Some people kind of thought that Thor 2 was a bit weak, like the character was getting tired. I didn't think that, but I've heard reviewers say that they thought Thor 2 was kind of lame. and that Phase 3 kind of got Phase 2 of these films, starting with Iron Man 3, was kind of off to a bad start with that. Albeit it started with Iron Man 3. So yeah, they don't want fatigue to set in. They don't want to overdo it. So see how the film goes. We didn't think that Iron Man was going to be Iron Man. When it came out, we thought it looked good, but we didn't know it was going to be so good and so popular, so well received, and such a hit. I kind of doubt that with Ant-Man. I think it's going to be a quieter film. It's going to be more of a heist film. I said this in yesterday's review. I think that the Ant-Man film, it's not going to be all about action and explosions. It's probably going to have that in it, but it's going to be more of an intellectual... the other films are quite clever as well, but I think this is going to be more of a sort of scientific exploration kind of film. And more of a caper as well, more of a kind of superhero caper film. I compared what I'm getting from the trailer, the feel of the film, I compared it to... a 1992, I think it is, film that John Carpenter directed called Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
Next thing I knew, I went from high profile to no profile.
What have they done to me?
Wait a minute, who are you guys?
Keep your mouths shut, all of you.
That certainly isn't an action film. It's not full of explosions and car chases, but it's got action stuff in it. And it's essentially a superhero film. So I think it's going to be more like that, and it's going to have an element of comedy to it as well, as you clearly get out of the trailer. It's not an all-out comedy. It's not like Guardians of the Galaxy, which is basically Star Wars superhero sitcom film, which is great because it worked. I don't think it's going to be quite like that, but it's got elements of humour to it, because how seriously can you take an Ant-Man character? It's not going to be the Dark Knight Rises. So that's it. Anyway, I think I've really how long have I been talking here? 26 minutes. Paul, I hope that answered your question. I hope to God that I haven't missed anything out, because otherwise I've just rambled on for 26 minutes. But yeah, I think that covers everything that you've asked. Is there anything else you think? Is there anything you want to kind of add to that? Leave comments on the website or on the YouTube page. brandxreviews.com is obviously the website, so we'll leave it there. If you've got any more questions, if you want to send in any submissions to Mailbag, you can email them, you can post comments anywhere on the website. You've got the Facebook page, which is accessible through the website. Obviously, it's Brand X Reviews. Go in the social media section on there, and you can go on Facebook and like the page. Leave a comment, send a message, whatever, and I will do my best to get to it when it's practical. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.